who is Terry James?
That's a good question, John. For those of you who don't know me, like John said, my name is Terry James. I'm rapidly verging on to 74 and I live in Ascot. Like some other people here online, it's a great place to live. And I enjoy it. I've been here for 3 years now in my new residence. Prior to that, I lived in Hornsby for 18 years, same street, so it's lucky. Didn't have to change much. I was one of the first generation of baby boomers, actually born in early 1947. So I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot, and some I really don't like to see, but it's just what time does to you, isn't it? I was lucky. I had a very normal upbringing, actually, and my family were lovely. Though my father left when I was 5, I didn't get to see him again until I was 35, which is a bit strange, but and it was a difficult decision to do, but we had to do it, I guess, in the end. I went to boarding school in Goulburn for 3 years at Baptist College. Came out already to travel to London to see the Beatles, the Cavern, and go all those travelling around Europe things. Then I got this letter in the mail one day from the Australian government saying, we want you for 2 years national service, and that ruined everything at that point in time. So I was conscripted into the army on the 4th of October 1967. It's the only lottery I've ever won since, I guess. So it's a time when probably changed me for better. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Actually, to a certain degree, I did. I wanted to be an archaeologist. I always loved archaeology, ancient history, Egyptology especially, still do. But that was no money in that. So anyway, I was conscripted, and that changed a certain way of my life, which is good. I went into the army on the 4th of October 1967. They shipped us down one night late down to a place at Wagga Kapuka Recruit Training Centre. Spent 3 months down there, graduated, not wanting to go into the infantry, but you had 3 choices when you graduate. I wanted to go into the Armoured Corps, artillery or engineers. I got infantry because they were looking for fodder for the Vietnam War at that point in time. It was the heart of the Vietnam War in 1967, 68. And I went to the infantry unit, went to corps training in Singleton for 3 months. Then I was posted to the 5th Battalion Royal Australian Regiment at Holsworthy, where it was called the Tiger Battalion, and we had a mascot called Quintus. He was a real tiger cub. And his handler was a guy called Maury Raper, who was the brother of the great football legend Johnny Raper. You remember Johnny Raper if you follow rugby league. So we had Quintus as a mascot, and we all knew at some stage that we were going to be posted overseas. Like I said, the Vietnam War was raging at that point in time. It had been in 1968, beginning of 1968, Tet Offensive happened, and everything was flying on from that. So we eventually were posted to Vietnam on February 1969, and I served the rest of the year in Vietnam there, just being discharged just before Christmas in 1969. So it was a traumatic period, I have to say, but it was a fun period as well. Like I said, I never wanted to be in the infantry, but I'm thankful now, on hindsight, and the fact that I survived, that I was, because we were special. Infantry are always special. Without infantry, you don't win wars. Anyway, we passed to Vietnam in 1969. I forget the exact date, but it was early February anyway. So I spent 11 months there in Vietnam on active service. We'd probably go on patrol, we called it operations in those days, operations for about 4 to 6 weeks in the jungle, then back to base camp for about 5 or 6 days, and out again. So it's recognised, I think, if you look in the history of all wars, that Vietnam veterans spent more time in the actual field than any other soldier in any other war zone in the history of written history anyway. If you go back through time, say back to World War One, many men spent time in the trenches, but it wasn't a lot of time. It was only a few weeks at a time, then back behind the zone. I think if you looked at the average of days per year in combat, we probably spent about 300 of those in combat, where most people in World War One and World War Two probably spent about significantly less than that, without giving the actual figures. It was a period of making men out of boys, it really was. And though I have to say, my mother said when I came back, I was cold and a bit cold-hearted, and a bit unusual, so to speak. But I changed to more a cold person. She's probably right, on reflection, but I think I'm okay. But back then, I was 20. I had my 21st birthday here just before I left, so I turned 22 in Vietnam. I was involved in what's called the Battle of Bin Ba, which is a big battle on the battle lines of the Royal Australian Regiment. One of the major battles in Vietnam over a 10-year period we were there. Actually, having the day after my birthday on the 6th of June, 1969, I was 22 on the 5th of June, just come back from an operation. Been in the what we call the boozer, had a couple of beers. Couldn't drink much, but we could drink occasionally back in base camp. So the next morning we were pulled out of bed early as a ready reaction company because the village had been overrun by NVA and VC. We were called out as a very much undermanned company of about 70 men with armored personnel carriers, tanks, and helicopter gunships. And we spent 3 days fighting house to house in this place called Bin Ba, which, if you look it up, you'll see it's on the battle line of the regiment. It was scary, got to say, boys. We had to run big camp from armored personnel carriers under heavy fire, house to house fighting for 3 days. Something we hadn't trained for, actually, because we trained for jungle fighting. Spent all our time jungle fighting, climbing hills, through valleys, across paddy fields, up mountains, through forests, through jungles, that kind of thing. So through rubber plantations, it was a bit different doing house to house fighting. Sad, we only lost one man there, which was fortunate, but we also had many, many wounded. I wasn't wounded there, but I was slightly wounded at a later stage. Not much, not even enough to go back to Australia, unfortunately. So it was shrapnel from a rocket-propelled grenade. So, what we did well, I think. The Australian Army was well trained in jungle warfare. We only related to the Americans on one occasion when they had us as a security company for their bulldozer company called the Rome Plows. They have all these big bulldozers next to each other, side by side, with these steel cables between them, and they'd drive forward and knock the jungle down. So it wasn't a place for the VC to escape from. So we were a security company for them. We were in the perimeter of their base for about 7 days. And we were stuck. Sorry? No.
About,
we were stuck with leeches and patrols, and they had an ice cream factory. So there you go. But it was a tough period. I went to Hong Kong for R&R in July 1969. I was there when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, actually, and I went to a hi-fi shop and watched it on TV. So it was very tempting, I would say, not to go back, but I couldn't have done that. I did go back and complete my tour. It was one of the things you do. And I made many friends in the army. They're great men. Sadly, I've lost too many lately. They're just passing away far too quickly. My best friend passed away 7 years ago. He was the man I credit getting me into golf. So best man at my wedding, best man at his wedding. We slept together more than we slept with our wives, I think, And we made great friends. Still the case. We have reunions regularly. I see all the mates that are still around that I can see. Matter of fact, we've got a reunion this year in Perth to commemorate that battle I talked about at Bin Ba. It was time when you decided that you had to stand up and do the things you had to do. I remember I was scared sometimes, but not always. But the most time I was scared was when, I'll give you analysis of this. We used to, call Hoochie up at Harbour Up at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We never patrolled at night time. We set up an ambush system always. And you go on what called machine gun picket, 2 hours on, 4 hours off. So, and you harbored up with a friend, and that was my friend Gary, who's passed away. It was a very dark night, no moon. And normally when that situation, you put what's called toggle ropes out so you could find your way to the machine gun picket. That didn't happen. We didn't put the toggle ropes out. So Gary, as I picket, he came to get me. He got lost, found me eventually. And I went to head to the machine gun picket. I got lost. I stepped outside the lines, the perimeter of our camp. And normally when you do that, you have a setup with claymore mines, flares, that kind of thing, trip flares. So I thought I'd trip one of those flares and be shot by my own people on a machine gun picket because I already had 2 people on it. But I called out very quietly for about 5 minutes, still lost. I eventually found it, but the guy who was on it was asleep, so I think I was lucky. You know? I think I made it. I bought a lottery ticket when I got home to cover that situation, I've got to tell you. So one night we slept, we did an ambush. We always ambush at night time, usually. And I slept behind a headstone. That was very eerie, I've got to say, in a Vietnamese cemetery. Yeah, that was very eerie as well. And one day we didn't know how long since the enemy had been through. So we found a grave, we dug it up, and you found from the body that the enemy had been there about 2 weeks before, and that body had been buried then, killed. So those are the kind of things you had to do to survive. And war isn't pretty. I mean, they're talking these days about the men in Afghanistan committing war crimes. Look, you have to do what you have to do to win a war. You can't win a war by fighting clean. That's my philosophy, having experienced it all. In 2019, we had the centenary of our sub-branch at Hornsby, and I had my special guest as Ben Robert Smith, who's the man in trouble at the moment with all the authorities. So he was having issues then. I sat next to Ben and I told him, look, I said, mate, just take it on the chin, stand up and be proud for what you've achieved, because you're the most gallant soldier in the Australian military. I still think that's the case. Yeah. And so, like I said, you can't win a war by fighting clean. So I spent 11 months over there. I came home just before the battalion did because my time was up on the national service. I had to come home. I wished I wanted to come home on the ship, but they wouldn't let me. They had to make me sign up for 3 years to do that, and I didn't want to do that at that stage. So I was here when the ship arrived home, and they marched through the city, and I didn't. I really regret that. That's one thing I really, really regret. Actually, I watched it from the old Town Hall Hotel upstairs bar. If you remember the Town Hall Hotel, that's where we watched it from. See my mates come home. I never got back into the army, though I was tempted at one stage. I missed it, as you do. I missed the discipline. I missed the friendship. I missed the camaraderie. I missed everything about it after 12 months. So I thought I'd go back into the Army Reserve and go through officer training. And then when I graduated from that, maybe transfer back to the regular army. Because when you do that, you drop a rank if you transfer from the reserves to the regular army. So if I was a second lieutenant, I can't drop any lower in rank in that situation. So I thought, go back as an officer. But I was engaged not long after I got home, to be honest. And I was working long hours and spending time on weekends and weeknights at parades and doing courses and everything for the officers' reserve training. My fiance said to me at the time, she said, "Oh, we're spending too much time away from home. It's either me or the army." And I said, "No, I was in love at that stage." So I said, "Yeah, gee." So I resigned halfway through the officers' training course, and that's something I also regret to this day. When I saw Peter Cosgrave last time, I said, "I could have been you." He said, "What? What the hell are you talking about?" I told him the story, So yeah, he's a nice guy. So that was the end of my career, effectively, in the military. It made me as a man, as I said. I lost some friends over there. I've lost some friends since, and I kill people. I kill people, and I do a lot of speeches at schools. I've done that over the years, and I'm still doing them now, actually. Tomorrow morning I'm speaking at St Ives High School for Anzac, and Friday for Pennant Hills High School. So I still give speeches. I've done dozens of them. The first thing I say to all the kids I speak to is, war is meant to kill people. It's not meant to be fun. It's not like you see in the movies where you see a nice clean shot to the head or the body. It's actual gore and blood and guts and body parts and that kind of thing. So, I say you will never, ever win a war if you don't fight to win it. We lost it politically. We've lost in the Middle East politically these days, Afghanistan and Iraq. You watch in 6 months' time, everything will be the same as it was before we even got there. And all these 41 men wasted their lives. In Vietnam, it was 521. And it was a very challenging time for all of us, I think. And like now, many of these young men have committed suicide. From Vietnam era, many of our men committed suicide as well. Matter of fact, one of my friends, only matter of 2 years ago, shot himself in the head in Victoria because he couldn't handle it anymore. And he was, by that stage, he was 70. Max Gardner, his name was. He was when I was in the army, you're in different units. Digby would understand this. All the guys from the military would understand the structure of an army unit. You have battalions, companies, platoons, sections. I was in 6th section, 11 platoon Delta Company. And I started out as a forward scout. That's the man up the front. So I led the way through on patrols. We never walked on tracks. We always moved our own way through the jungle to make sure we weren't ambushed. So on that occasion, we did strike like that. We pinned down for 4 hours once under heavy fire from RPGs and machine guns. It was, and we learned the things to do and what not to do very, very rapidly. The Australian soldier just carries themselves proudly, I think, and I'm proud to have been part of that. So long ago now, it's 52 years since I got home, nearly 50 years since I got home. And it makes me feel old when you say it that way, but I still don't feel old in the sense of, apart from my bad knee, of course, and bad back and arthritis and all that kind of stuff, But no, look, I'm going okay these days. When I got out of the army, I didn't know what to do. So I went back to the job I had before, which was working in the Department of Government Transport as a revenue clerk at bus depots. That lasted about 2 months, and I said, no, don't want that. So I applied to join the Overseas Telecommunications Commission, joined that, worked there for 11 years. At the same time, I started to study, and that was accountancy. So that was paid for by the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I studied that, which is some benefits I do get. So I became an accountant. I worked in a lot of major companies over time. Well, actually, I retired 20 years ago, I believe, because I retired at 53 early because I was hit by PTSD. I'll get into that in a minute. But so I worked for many, many major companies as financial controllers and accountants and that kind of thing. My last job before I quit was with Paramount Pictures. It was a great place to work because we had our own cinema. We'd see previews of all the movies coming to Australia and everything. It was great. But when I was about 47, I got hit by something. All the years that I left, after I left the army, I put it behind me like it never happened. It just never happened. I never joined the RSL. I never went to any Anzac marches. I never did anything. I think it was a psychological factor that I just didn't want to know about all the things that I'd seen and done. And for some reason, out of the blue, it came out one day and never went back. So I started seeing a psychiatrist when I was 47, and I saw him every month for about 18 years, I suppose. I don't see him now. I think I'm in a state where I'm okay, but I saw him every month for 18 years. I was suffering from PTSD and what was called survivor guilt. I'll tell you how that happened. On one of our patrols as a forward scout, you get to lead the way, and there's a second forward scout, and you're walking like on days. So one day it's your turn, next day it's the other guy's turn, next day. So one day it was my turn, and he'd done it the day before, and he said, no, I'll do it again today. I said, no. But he did. And we actually walked into one of the very few ambushes we walked into, stumbled actually across an enemy divisional bunker system. And he was shot through the shoulder and lay down in front of me for about 4 hours. We couldn't get to him because we were pinned down by heavy fire from machine guns and rocket propelled grenades. And he died from loss of blood about 5 meters in front of me. Couldn't get to him at all. Ever since then, I blame myself for that. And he was due to come home the day after that, a week after that, for the birth of his first child on R&R. So he died instead of me, I guess, and I never forgave myself for that. But I put it behind me for a long time. But sometime around 47, this shit came out. And I started to suffer severely then from mental distress. And I hit the grog. And, I got nightmares. I still get the odd nightmare, flashbacks, that kind of thing. But it was bad at that point in time. So I had to go and see a psychiatrist. And I quit. It's part of the reason why I quit work, actually, because I couldn't handle the work situation after that. So it took me about 5 years to have to quit work, but got to a point where I didn't even know what I was doing at work as a manager. So I said, no, that's no good. So I quit. And I was able to, fortunately, to get the gold card TPI through the DVA. I went through a lot of sessions for that. So I'm on war service pensions now. But it was a period which came back to suddenly out of the blue, something I didn't expect, because I was, for some reason, I must have been thinking about this guy's name was Jeff Pike, by the way, nice guy, and I still blame myself for his death, and that's what I call survivor guilt. So it's something you suffer with for a long time. I'll never forget, actually. But the same breath, having said that, I'm now over a lot of the angst I felt about it, but I'll never forget it. And that's what survivor guilt is, and PTSD. Now, a lot of the guys, young guys today, they're suffering with PTSD because the things you have to do, you automatically do. You're trained to kill. You're trained to do everything instinctively. You're trained to actually deal with situations without showing emotion on the battlefield. And it's only when you get home with later reflection, talking to people of similar things, that sometimes it comes to haunt you. And that's what these young guys are facing today. They've done a great job in Afghanistan and Iraq, following in our footsteps, I think. And when we got home, we were shunned by the population. Something we tried not to do in the RSL at Hornsby when I was president, secretary first and then president for many years. We took the young guys into our heart, I mean, as best we could, if they wanted to. The problem is their interpretation of the RSL these days is just a lot of guys drinking and playing poker machine. But in New South Wales, we don't own the RSL clubs. They're separate entities altogether. Other states it's different, but in New South Wales, we're completely separate to the RSL clubs. So they don't get the picture, but we tried always to look after the young guys and make sure that they were handled in a way which we weren't handled, with the right kind of treatment, the right kind of professional treatment especially. And with Hornsby was setting up, before I left, we were setting up a whole pile of systems to make sure that the younger guys can come and be involved. Last year, I quit the RSL after nearly 12 years service there. In March last year, the AGM, I stood down because I had enough. It worn me out, actually. There was mental stuff going on with all the things you have to associate it with death and all that kind of stuff. I did so many funerals, so many RSL funerals for veterans that, it takes a toll eventually. And I stood down at nearly 12 years. I took the time, the COVID timing was perfect, actually. I took the time to get back to my writing. I'm writing a couple of books at the moment. So I thought that's a great time. I can't go out, can't do anything else. I can't be sad about leaving the RSL because they're not doing anything anyway. So I'll sit back and writing. But no, that didn't happen. I've already been treasurer of my golf club for 20 years. But my wife plays bowls at Ascot Bowling Club, and all her friends are saying, come on, get onto the board of the bowling club. I said, no, don't want to do that. But they eventually taught me to do it, and I joined the board in August last year, the Ascot Bowling Club. That's what I'm doing now. And actually, I'm enjoying it. All these jobs we do are obviously gratis. We don't get paid for anything, so I enjoy doing that. I play golf once a week. I've got 5 grandkids. The oldest turns 25 this year. She's just graduated with a master's in physiotherapy. She did a degree. Now she's got a master's. The middle one's got a degree in Bachelor of Commerce. She's just moving out from home next Saturday for the first time. Youngest one's doing HSC this year. My son in Brisbane, he's got 2 children, 13 and 12, year 8 and year 7 at high school. Living the life now at the moment. Bad knee, bad back. Got to have a knee replacement this year sometime. And what else? A few other ailments.
Playing golf, Terry. You're still playing golf.
Once a week, John. Once a week, mate. Yeah, I played today. Yeah, I played today. Actually, I played very well today. Last week, I finished last out of the field at 57. Today, I finished about 50 out of about 54. So how can you explain that?
But it really is a life of service, and you wanted to pose that question to the group about what does service mean to you?
Yeah, look, I think, John, service is something which is very hard to explain. It's something it's innate within you, I think. It's something you devote your whole being to, in the sense of your emotional involvement in it. I only served 2 years in the military, to which I regret to a certain degree because I wanted to transfer back to it, but didn't. Women took over, unfortunately. And So it's something I maybe always regret, but I did meet my wife for not being in the military, so that's good. Yeah, service is something which really, I think, you need to be proud of. I mean, look, let's look at the Duke of Edinburgh. He did. Now, I'm not a royalist. I'd admit, gents, I'm a Republican. Okay, so, but I appreciate the fact that Prince Philip served his entire life serving the monarchy and serving his country in the Commonwealth, and he did it without real complaint. That's what service is. I think that's the epitome of service, to be honest. I don't believe in royalty. I'm a Republican, but that's the way it is. And service is can be done in any kind of organisation. You can long term. I mean, there's a friend of mine I play golf with on Wednesdays. He got an OAM for service to Little Athletics.
Tell us a little bit about what you described as service and the value that you see in service. Who's the spokesperson?
Peter.
Peter's making lots of notes.
Yeah, I was trying to keep up. Yeah, we had some wide-ranging discussion, but I think for some of the points that we touched on in our group, particularly one strong point on the current topic of service personnel is that they needed more support, and that even though someone has provided service to others by serving in the Defence Forces, they need support as well when they come back. Other points that Rafa made in regards to a collective culture, which is a different perspective of it, and he was saying culturally that in his country that they have kind of some sayings that service is really compulsory in the culture. You know, you don't have a choice to be individual. It's the collective, and what's best for the collective is paramount. And just simple sayings, I think, Rafa, if I got it right, the neighbour is your family, and you can't have peace if your neighbours don't have peace. Was that right? Yeah. Which really, right. Yeah, sums up how a collective culture looks at the term service. And then I think Trent also mentioned about services as a teacher, how you're giving knowledge to younger generations, and service takes many forms, but basically it's giving to other people rather than for yourself. So it's what's best for the group or other people, and that is what service is about. And for me, it's serving others, it's serving your community, it's serving your country. It's something other than yourself. Yeah.
Doing good for others without seeking personal gain. Digby spoke, and I didn't really get this down, Digby, about a lot of what we would be doing in a number of what we would traditionally call the services, be they military, police, or I guess ambulance and the like, and just the work and solidarity that comes out of that. Another observation was that service could be an occupation, but also it could be to give to others, as in paying something forward into the community. This sense of giving to others, and the idea that it grows out of or is a part of our being connected to others. There was the comment of this in a number of the services, be it army or the police, etc. This term, a return of service, that is to repay the investment of society into you, or the investment of society in you, or the investment of society for you. Spoke of the word often used in religious circles of piety, and in ancient Roman times, the idea of piety was the work you did for the family, not out of obligation or law, but because you were a member of the family and because of your love and affection and loyalty for the family. So not something you do because of law or obligation or fear of punishment, because of your loyalty and affection for the community. And then there was the reflection on, or an observation on the fruit of service, and that of delight of giving, and that delight and I guess strength that comes from a strength of connection and of solidarity, of mateship that's either there between men or women.
No, well, there's certainly no monetary compensation for the things that I do in society these days, but I get enjoyment out of it, to be honest. But it makes me feel good looking after other people who are less well off than I am and who need help more than I might need help at this point in time. And I certainly like to contribute to the community I live in, and I do that as best I can through many sources.
Yeah,
I think that's important for me anyway. It's something I don't have to do. I mean, there's no money, as I said, there's no monetary compensation, but partly as well, I think it's because as you get older, you think, I've got to keep my brain active. I've got to keep doing things. It'd be easy to sit down and vegetate in front of the TV every day and do nothing. That's certainly not what I want to do. I want to make sure I get out in the community and do things which will help not only myself and my family, but other people as well. That's basically it, I guess.
I thought of two huge injustices that happened. The first was with the Vietnam War, where in Terry's case or whatever, it was compulsory conscription. I remember there's a guy called, I think it was Albert Langer, and it was rare that anyone stood up, and you really had no choice. A political decision decided that you were going to go over there. Then when the politics changed, the way these men were treated when they came back was just awful, and it's disgrace. I think that's addressed over time. That was the first thing. And the second thing, the second injustice that I see, and it's interesting, there's a Royal Commission being announced in the last week, but is that, as Terry said, these men are basically programmed to kill. And I guess Terry helped me understand the graphic nature. I've got a film type view of war.
Yeah.
But where's the support? Where's the effective support that's going to help these guys when they come back to deprogram them or give them support? And clearly, whatever has been going on is inadequate. Something else needs to be done.
Certainly, it was an upsetting period when you got home because nobody really wanted to know you, especially given all the later transition, as you said. The early days was fine. We got marched through the cities and all that kind of stuff, but later on, no, it was the Vietnam veterans didn't want to know you. You never talked about it. You actually hid it for many years that you were. Now there's people wanting to be Vietnam veterans because of the support of what we've made of ourselves. We did the whole thing ourselves. We had the Welcome Home Parade ourselves. We organised that. And we did our own Department of Veterans Affairs involvement, and we played the Vietnam Veterans Federation, which has now become another organisation, including men from current conflicts. And it's just gone on from there. The current guys, well, they don't. We were a mixture of regular army and national service people in my time. We went back to our normal jobs because our jobs are held open for us. The current men are full-time military people. That's their career. That's all they've done. They've learned discipline. They've learned taking commands, giving orders, living a formal, structured life. If they come back into society, it's not the case always. And they really haven't learned how to deal with that. And that's probably something they do. I know that the RSL in New South Wales are getting schemes in place to help those situations, but it's still not good enough everywhere. And I think, as you say correctly, I think more needs to be done to support these young guys when they come back from war. It's like men don't like to ask for directions when they're looking to try and find a place on the roadmap, do they? Women can't drive, men can't look for directions or ask for directions. Yeah, when it comes to ex-military people, they're trained to think for themselves. They're trained to take orders and think for themselves. And trying to find their way in an environment they're not used to is very difficult for them, I think. And I'm sure that organisations like Mentoring Men will be able to contribute greatly towards those kind of scenarios. I hope so anyway.
Is there any reason why the people leaving the armed forces sometimes don't seek support? Like I know there's a group called Open Arms. One of our guys was a senior person in the Navy, and I think there's Open Arms is an outside group that support them.
Yeah.
But,
well, there's a few outside groups called Mates for Mates and those kind of things. You know, they're all organisations which are in direct competition actually with the RSL, and they're probably getting good coverage out of all this, and they're doing their great bit for the younger generation. You can't get them to join the RSL. So, I think the things that you guys are up to will certainly be beneficial helping the young guys.
But I think we need to wait until people learn to reach out for help. And I rather think it's so important, and I'm horrified by how this inquiry has been run, the arrogance of the military, the arrogance of the commissioner, in the way in which they opened up discussions about it. I mentioned in my remarks in the group that Brereton, the judge who was the commissioner, in the article in the Herald that interviewed him, that compared what he did in relation to his inquiry to the inquiry by his own father in World War II of Japanese war criminals. And I found that comparison or parallel absolutely horrifying. But I think we should put that aside and pick up where you Ian, are heading, and even something as simple as finding out who you can call and ask them, or we can call the family, and just simply ask them, are you okay? Can we help? And Mentoring Men and these sort of organisations have a role, and I think it's a role that they need to as soon as possible.
We worry a bit about this Royal Commission in the sense that I think the people that will most benefit out of it are the lawyers. That's what I think will happen in the long term. I don't know there'll be any positive result. My preference would have been to have a standing commissioner, like Scott Morrison suggested, running this thing permanently rather than a Royal Commission over a limited period.
I was very interested, Terry, when you were saying that when you did get back, how you shunned joining the reunions and shunned the RSL. And I've heard that a bit when my father was alive with his from World War II, that same thing, that they sort of got on with life. But there was a catalyst for them to actually get together. But it was really late, much later in life for him and his colleagues. But I was just interested when you said exactly the same thing. I just wonder what the catalyst was for you to join up and meet with some of your old buddies.
I can tell you, firstly, the catalyst for me not being involved might have been when we were getting discharged to South Head. We used to turn up in the morning for a roll call at 0800. They'd send us away for the rest of the day. We'd go down to the pub at Watson's Bay or Bondi or something, and we go back at 1600 in the afternoon to dismissal. So it was a discharge process in 1969. One day we're down at the Rose Bay Hotel. We're sitting there in our uniforms with our ribbon strips on, and there's a group of older guys, obviously World War II veterans, in a table nearby. They looked at us and said, "You guys just back from Vietnam?" We said, "Yeah, we are." Thinking how proud we are of doing that. And they said, "Oh, that wasn't a war." And that was part of the things that maybe psychologically or mentally turned me off anything to do with the RSL at that point in time. But I can't really explain the actual incident which might have, or the trigger which got me going back into the thing. It just happened one day. And I used to get flashbacks from that point onwards, and I've had nightmares. I've had a permanent nightmare for a long time of being stabbed in the stomach slowly by a bayonet. And I did have hand-to-hand combat at one stage, but that didn't happen, of course. But I had that nightmare. But there was no real trigger I can come across which got me back into it. It just seemed to progress slowly. And one day, that was it. I never stopped looking backwards.
There seems to be two areas in the service, from my experience. I know with a lot of my Army friends who'd actually seen active service, as opposed to the service person that had done 4, 8 or 12 years, got out as a driver, as a clerk, as an accountant, as a mechanic, an electrician, or whatever. They had a trade behind them now, and they didn't have an issue. The chance of them coming out with a PTSD situation was very remote. Subsequently, they would not have needed support to.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bigby.
Pardon?
It's a good point.
Yeah, they would not have needed the support to assimilate back into Civvy Street. I remember seeing an officer a couple of weeks after I was out of the Air Force and I saluted them, and I was in civvies. The hand just went up, and
instinctively.
Yeah, Kevin just laughed at me. He said, mate, he said, I thought you got out. He said, I did. He said, what's with the salute? I said, old habits die hard, you know.
Yeah,
now, I know today I had a chaplaincy half day at the Sand, and at the end of that half day, we had a debrief. How many people did we speak to? What were the issues? Did any of them need extra support? Was there anything I needed to pass on? And so that was an opportunity to unload of any fears or concerns or worries I might have had from the different conversations that I'd had. I know Ian and I touched on this a little bit. With mentoring men, it's the same thing. The mentor goes in with the mentee, especially I think after the first occasion where you have your first meeting, and then you need to unwind, unload, and share with another person. I think that's very important. So an active serviceman, a pilot in an aircraft that's been in a tactical situation, a soldier on the ground, even special services or the police and the ambulance service. I think the police probably have a great need for debriefing and support when they resign, because they've been pigs, they've been screws, they've been there's a great element of the public that don't respect the police force and the good work that they do.
When I was in Maryborough, I had quite a deal to do with the butler for the local traditional owners of the land up there. And talking to Uncle Glenn, he said these are the three things of butler law. What is good for the land comes first.
Yeah.
If you have plenty, you must share. Do not touch or take anything that is not yours. And he went on to say, I think this touches into service, Aboriginal people survived in Australia for so long because everyone knew that the community was more important than the individual.
Yeah.
If the community survives, then so too does the individual.
What a great philosophy.
But there's a certain arrogance in our culture here. And the reality is, by any measure, Australians have never been more lonely, isolated, anxious, depressed, and suicidal. They're facts. And I think a lot of it to do is, we've touched on it briefly with this movement away from service, this movement away from the village. And we can look at Rafa in Burundi or these other cultures that we see, Indigenous people in Australia, where it's those values that Jeff espoused and the comments that Rafa made before about the way the village worked together. I strongly feel we've got it wrong and we need to address this. And if we don't address it, those trends that I talked about before are going to get worse. And I don't know if it's greed, selfishness, I don't know what it is, but we need to change that.
I'm making a kind of comparison, analogy, as to some reasons as to why some people don't seek help when they need it. My example here is some people from the refugee background, people who came from overseas. They are very qualified, very educated. And once they go here, they've lost everything, including the dignity. And because of the pride, I call it a culture barrier. They've been working high jobs back home, senior staff from government, politicians. Once they are here, they've lost everything. They find it hard to be flexible and they twist their brain and they start from scratch. So of course, some are flexible, they learn new skills, they adapt, they adjust to adapt, but some, that's not for everyone.
Terry, on SBS News tonight, they had an account of a Chinese Australian who had very similar instance to you. He came back from the war, and then many years later, probably in his 40s or something similar to you, he had an attack and it all came back. But Mike, I guess it's a common issue, and from my experience, I've got a prospective son-in-law who's served in Afghanistan for
great.
years. Yeah. But I was just wondering, in your experience, would mentoring been an effective tool to help some of the issues with PTSD, or is it just too big an issue and that it really needs professional advice like you saw?
He's been to war, right? I think he needs professional help to start off with. I think organisations like Mentoring Men and similar can be on the periphery to a certain degree, but I think he needs professionals if he's got issues to start off with. You can always step out of that professional zone if you want to, like I did after many years. I probably did it for 20 years straight. In the end, he wasn't helping me. I think I got through the rest of it by myself.
Yeah.
But I think to start off with, he needs professional help of some sort.
Yeah. Can I just make a comment? It doesn't need to be mutually exclusive. We often have a guy's got a mentor because it's like a long-term 6-month plus relationship, and in parallel they're going to see getting professional support as well. So there is an advantage there when they see the professional support, and it can just stop, and then that's it's something that can continue on. So we have a number of guys in the program who are getting both.